Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today on another edition of the BIRMM Spotlight. And today we have a special guest, and she is Dr. Valériane Mistiaen. She is a postdoctoral researcher in the Department of Communication Studies. So I will leave the floor for her to introduce herself. Can you please tell us who you are very briefly?
Of course. So first, on a personal level, I'm almost 40 years old. I'm the mother of 4 young boys. I like cooking, reading, doing sports. But I suppose this is not what interests you today.
That's interesting, actually. Yeah.
So I completed a joint PhD between ULB and VUB in 2023 about people's denomination in media discourse in French and Dutch language. And then when I was, maybe I have to start from the beginning, because I became interested in migration and migration discourses when I was working in a non-profit organization called Convivial.
Mm-hmm.
I was the communication officer, and at the moment to write the annual report, I asked myself, but which word do I have to use to speak about the people we support?
Yeah.
And actually that question stayed with me, and it gave rise to a research project which was financed by the FNRS at ULB. Yeah. And then I did my PhD, and I also joined the VUB because I wanted to have an insight over Dutch language discourses. Yeah. And at the end of my PhD, I noticed that a lot of terms starting with the prefix re were used in migration discourse, like resettlement, readmission, reintegration. And I asked myself if it was a coincidence or not. So I quickly tried to write a postdoc project, which I submitted to the FWO, and I was lucky enough to be funded.
Yeah, great. So, but before we go to the postdoc project that you're working on now, so when we were preparing for this interview, we realized that your PhD project inspired a lot, or to some extent, the current project that you're working on as a postdoc.
Yeah.
Can you please tell us more in detail what the PhD project was about and what were the overall findings?
Of course. So I already told you how I became interested in that topic, but also I didn't expect the result that I found in my research. So I study more than 13,000 newspapers articles and more than 3,400 TV news on migration in the French language community and in the Dutch language community. So that was the 2 main leading newspapers and the 2 main TV channels. The corpus focused on the so-called refugee crisis, and it starts from March 2015, so just before the first media hype, and it ends in July 2017 after the arrival decreased. And I use corpus linguistics, so how can I define this? It's a statistical analysis of the lexis and discourse analysis to study all the denomination and designation used to name people on the move in these articles or news, TV news. And the research led to 4 main findings. The first one is the lexical creativity, because I found more than 300 denomination and designations. A bit more in the Dutch language corpora than in the French language corpora. And this goes from the more temporary to the more permanent denominations. So we can see, for example, the use of friends, of illegal or freeloaders, even though it's not widely used in the common discourse. What I also noticed from this is the permeability from politicians to media discourse. This means that media will use political denominations, even though they will often say, this is a politician who say that, or quote it in quotation marks, but this denomination circulates in media discourse and then after in language, of course. and why there is so much creativity in the lexis use, I think it's because the journalists and the politicians needs to describe all the realities, and there are a lot of different realities, of course. So in a way, they did a good job, because we see that they try to be as precise as possible. But of course, these new categories or specific cases can have a very little occurrence. So it can be mentioned only once, twice, or 10 times in my corpus, but still I took them. My second finding is about the different aspects that denomination bring together. So we have denomination about the origin, about the movement itself or the destination, but also about kinship denominations. So a lot of different things actually. When I started my PhD, I was thinking that I will find more or less 50 different words, but actually I end up with more than 300. In this 300, of course, there are words, but there are also phrases. So people on the move, people in need, these are phrases. The third result I come up with is the fact that this denomination in a way classify people. So even though we have a large creativity, we also have denomination who serve to explain who deserve to be a refugee or to have the political status and who don't. So I was thinking of the typical political refugee, and its deservingness to have the statue, while the economic migrants are not really welcomed. And also, this is very interesting to study all the terms together and not only a few terms related to migration, because in this paradigm of term, I can also see how they evolve in meaning, in comparison with or in contrast with another word, or just next to another one. This is interesting to have the whole picture actually, because if we only study the normal terms or the usual most common terms, we don't have the whole picture of everything, and we don't know, for example, academic discourse come into media, or activist discourse also, because French is of course a denomination that comes from activist discourse. So for me it was really interesting to see how the meaning evolve in connection with or in the context and in contrast with other denomination. And finally, one I think significant result also is that we can see that the studies show how the social memory of a part of the same country is built differently, actually. In French-speaking Belgium and Dutch-speaking Belgium, we don't record the same event with the same denomination and the same lexical items. So for me, it's also underlined the news-making routines of journalists, of course, and this shape social reality in a way. So it's not only about words, it's also broader than just the words. The result of this research came with a book, which is an open access book called Did You Say Migrant? Media Representation of People on the Move. You can find it.
We will have a link somewhere in the video where people can check it out. Great, thank you so much for this insight already. So now shifting into the work that you do now, your research as a postdoc. So you now focus on quote how grammatical morphology carries ideology in state-induced discourses related to migration. So if you would explain this to a layman, how will you describe it, and what does your research entail now? What do you focus on now as a postdoc?
I think it's always very difficult for us to try to get this academic discourse, but I will try my best to answer the question. Maybe I can start with the sustainable solutions that are used by the UNHCR, IOM, and the EU discourse in its EU discourse. So according to this international organization, there are 3 sustainable solutions to the refugee issue. First, the local integration in the country of destination. So like people arriving in Belgium will try to integrate them. Second, the voluntary return to the country of origin. And third, the resettlement in a third country. In these three solutions, we have already two we. So I started becoming interested in this, and I saw that actually a lot of words in this IOM, UNHCR and European discourse use the we, like reintegration, repatriation, relocation, resettlement, and even return in a way. So I started asking myself, is that normal? Or also asked myself at the very beginning of the project, why do we use readmission, for example? So readmission, it's the fact that someone else goes back to its country or a third country where it transits. And this is a political agreement with several countries that Europe has. But actually, in a way, in discourse, I like the word readmission. It's beautiful, it's quite neutral, it looks nice. But in practice, it's a bit like deportation. So I really, when I noticed this, I really asked myself if it was normal or if we use these terms just to smooth the discourse. So that's how the project started. I wanted first to study that in the European discourse because I saw that a lot of words were coming from this discourse, but actually now I'm in the second phase of the project, and I noticed that this probably doesn't come from the EU. I think when I noticed that deportation wasn't used, I really believe that these terms are used to smooth the discourse.
More sanitized terms.
Exactly. So I studied that in the discourse, and then in the UNHCR and IOM discourse, and then at local level. So I want to study that at local NGOs in the Canary Islands first, because I think it's the first country of arrival which is less documented than the Mediterranean. Then in Belgium, I call that either a transit or an accidental arrival country. And of course in the UK, because I think it's the intended destination for a lot of asylum seekers. And my aim is to see if these terms circulate only at policy level, or if they are also going to lay discourse and NGOs, local NGOs discourse. If they go till local NGOs, I would like to know how they use these terms, and which meaning do they give to these terms. But for the moment, I'm only at the second phase of the project, so I cannot really go deeper into the finding about NGOs, but I can already give you some findings from the others part if you want.
Absolutely.
So from the European discourse, what I find really interesting, it's at the end, it doesn't say that much about migration. It says much more about Europe itself. How Europe presents itself as a defender of human rights, democracy, but at the same time justifying strict control of migration. So for me, there is an opposition in discourse, and they use the migration management discourse to try to mix everything and to put it, return things as much as neutral or technical problems actually to be solved. There is a problem, we need to solve it. What are we doing? We use management to solve it, and then of course, because management involves figures, reports, and other reports, and other. In my corpus, we can really observe reports I use to do other reports, and then after other reports, and this is very interesting to see how it works because it's self-justifying rhetoric in a way. So I think this tension between security and human rights is not new. Of course, it comes from Schengen Agreement and the freedom of movement. But what I see in my corpus is that this management discourse is really there to be objective and neutral. This is the most important findings. Then findings. Sorry. Then I observed two interesting shifts. The first one is that since 1999 and the Temporary Council, the EU used migration instead of immigration. So when I noticed this, I wonder why, of course. So I went to all the occurrences of migration in my corpus, so quite a lot. It takes me more than 1 week to read everything. And I try to replace them with immigration, the dictionary definition of immigration. And actually it worked. So this means they are using a term which is vaguer, because of course migration is in and out movement, instead of a very more, I would say, more precise term, immigration, which is only in movement. So I don't have a clear explanation. I think that maybe it's because it was a bit negatively connotated, so they try to replace it to evacuate the negativity of the discourse. That's one possibility. And the other thing, the other very interesting thing, and I have a quote to illustrate this, I took it here, is that the concept of solidarity and cooperation, which by definition are voluntary, are becoming more and more compulsory. So I will read you an extract of the 2020 Asylum and Migration Management Proposal, which says, a wider solidarity concept is needed. The solidarity concept should be compulsory in nature in order to respond predictably and effectively to changing realities with an increasing share of mixed migration flows toward the Union. So in this example, we can really see that solidarity is not optional, it's not voluntary anymore, it's really not an option, you have to. So this is maybe not only linked to migration, but I observed this in my corpus. Another observation is that migration is frequently linked to broader issues like climate change, poverty, inequality, and I feel that this connection are used to justify the link between asylum and return. This is a whole discourse about issues, and this is explaining return and asylum. I think that's more or less this. Maybe one more thing that I conclude with the European discourse on migration. It's, in a way, we can argue that this is reproducing colonial structure power, because it's also saying who is legitimized to enter Europe, who is not. And it's also presenting Europe as a civilized Europe, the one who defends human rights and democracy, opposed to threatening others. And I think, well, it's maybe going a bit beyond my research, but I think this is also an interesting point. And in the current phase of the research, so I did start to study the UNHCR and the IOM discourse, but to be honest, it's huge. So I only have a few things to say about that, but still I think it could be interesting. I noticed that from early 2000 in the UNHCR discourse, they used the 4R approach, which was, I'm reading to not make mistake, repatriation, reintegration, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. And then I led interviews with UNHCR representative 2-3 months ago. And it was very interesting because they spoke about a 3R policy. This 4R approach doesn't exist anymore.
It's gone now.
And do you know what is it, the 3R policy?
Maybe return, readmission, reintegration.
Perfect. Perfect. So what do you think about this? Maybe as a non-linguist view, do you think this shift from the 4R approach, like, which include, for example, reconstruction?
Because I am thinking about reconstruction mainly in the context of people who had to flee from war zones or conflict affected areas, and perhaps these conflicts are now over. It is now time to go back and then help them to reintegrate, rehabilitate them, but also build the societies that they have to flee in the first place. No?
Of course, I think it's a good explanation, but I also wonder if this shift is also reconstruction. For me, it's more positive than return, for example, or readmission.
Yes.
So in a way, would that words for the 4R approach being a bit more positive and the 3R policy a bit more negative, or not negative but linked to return, because these terms are only referring to return.
Yeah.
So well, that's something I was wondering, but I didn't finish.
Maybe we will have another opportunity to do another interview to follow up on the on the new results that will eventually come up. But now I will just go to the other question, because I think you already explained very well why you focus on return as well. So maybe we can just go to the other question very quickly. And here I just want to get your reflections as a researcher who focuses on words that are used to describe people on the move, or migrants or refugees in general. And I was just wondering, what are your general reflections on the kind of words that politicians, ordinary people use to describe migrants and refugees in both the media but also in policy discourses? What are your reflections overall?
So regarding politician discourse, of course, I live in Belgium. I read Belgian newspapers, and of course the PhD that I did is about Belgium. I observe that even if very negative terms are used by journalists, coming from the politician discourse, journalists will put them in quotation marks or really use them in reported speech. Which, this is a finding I didn't expect. I thought that journalists won't pay attention to this, but actually they did. And they always, when, for example, I had a few occurrences of allochtone in my Dutch language corpus, which is quite negatively connotated, and it was always mentioned because a politician mentioned it. Of course, the problem in this, well, it's not a problem that the journalists quote it in quotation mark. I think that they do a good job. But the problem is more that this term will at the end enter lay discourse and everyday conversation. And well, this is also related to what we observe today, because of course I did my PhD in 2015 on discourse on 2015 to 2017. And today we see that populist politicians or even far-right parties have much more place in our society, but also in media. So this will also mean that probably terms which are quite negatively connotated will enter lay discourse, and that can be a fear. On the other hand, I know journalists, at least in Belgium, also have code books and the guidelines, so they are informed. But of course, as a journalist, you don't have much time to write an article. You don't always think that you will have to refer to a guideline, or sometimes you don't know that there is a guideline about migration-related terms. But this is something significant in my corpus.
And so you talk about how, the different terms that politicians will use to describe migrants or refugees in general. And I was just wondering, because you also focus a lot on the Belgian context, do you think it has improved over the years, the terms that they use to describe migrants when they talk, or has it become even worse over the past few years?
That's a very good question, and difficult question. I think that there is something, as I explained at the very beginning, one of the results of my PhD was that the terms differ according to the context, to the time, and so on. But also the meaning of the same term can differ across time. And a very good example of this is that guest worker, which was mainly used before immigrants, was negatively connotated. So they changed it for immigrant. And now it's immigrant which is negatively connotated. So we use migrant. So we can clearly see this observation. I think we need to know history and our past to understand it well. And in the future, I don't know. I don't have any crystal ball yet. But one also, it makes me think to one observation I did after my PhD, because it's related to the Ukrainian and Russian wars. I don't know if you remember, but in 2020, all the, at least Belgian media, clearly say that those people were refugees or exiles. They didn't use migrant or asylum seekers, even though legally they don't have any refugee status, which is because they have the directive, the 2001 directive status. But this is very interesting because there was a consensus about this. It was very clear that they were named refugees. And we can see that it wasn't the same when in 2015 the Syrian arrived. There were always debates about are they migrants, are they refugees. So we can see that sometimes it happens and it's good. I mean, they try to use more positive words.
Indeed. And I think you quite understand how much words have an impact, not only on how migrants or refugees are seen, but also how the public behave towards a certain group. And I was just wondering whether do you see any impact on how these different terms that are used also influence the public attitude towards this group?
Okay, so I will answer in two different ways. The first thing is that in discourse analysis, this is the basis. Of course, words are actually acts that construct social reality. So I do believe this. But I'm not conducting opinion surveys, of course. But what I can tell you is that at first, when I worked in the intermediate project back in 2017, the KU Leuven team was responsible for this part of opinion surveys. So researcher like Lynn Dannings or David de Koning, they did that part of the job. And they noticed that, so they if I remember it well, they put the same sentence, like fake newspaper headline, one with refugee and the other one with immigrant. And they went to school to see how the people react to these different terms. And they noticed actually that there was a very huge difference, but also regarding the news consumption. So it wasn't only the term, it was also related to which media do you often read or watch, if I remember it well. So.
And do you think research has a role to play in this?
Of course, I didn't say it at the very beginning, but one part of my personal life is also related to a Warnet Rising project. I like my job here in academia, really, but I do feel that if we don't share our results beyond journals or conferences, who will read us? So I think we have a huge responsibility. I also think that it's nice to know what happened on the field. So I try my best to help in exhibitions or writing workshop at Fedazil, for example. I think the connections need to be done, and I also think that some NGOs or non-profit organizations are really willing to collaborate. So I think we have to take a part in this and participate.
And I have to say, your current research is super interesting, and I was just wondering, because of course it's still work in progress, what do you hope to achieve with the findings that will eventually emerge from this project?
That's also a very good question. Well, I hope to, in a way, I hope to help people being journalists or policymakers or citizens or civil servants, whatever, to understand that sometimes discourse have hidden patterns, like grammar. Grammar is not something that we see directly, and that we have to pay attention to what is said and to what we say, of course. And I hope, I don't know yet about the findings themselves, but I hope this will rise or shed light on these hidden patterns of discourse. I also think a good a good thing will be that to share the result beyond academia and then inform, maybe also not only inform but also support journalists in the way they have to work. So that's my hope.
That's a very good hope. That's a very good hope. And just finally, the last question. So we have the International Migrants Day coming up very soon in a few weeks, and we see now how migrants, refugees are portrayed in media discourses, policy debates as well. What is your vision? I mean, moving forward, how do you hope to see people represent migrants and refugees in policy debates, media discourses, etc.?
I like your questions.
Thank you.
What I really hope is that we can always make mistakes and use a term which is not appropriate. But maybe we can also come back on what we said and explain why we use that word or why we use that word badly, for example. But I think what it's important to me, and I hope that's what will happen in discourse, is that migration discourse will represent the diversity of situations. Of course, one person has a very different experience to another one, and this is in every situation, not only in migration paths. And the other thing I hope we will see, and it's usually the case when it's the International Migrant Day, is to give more space to voices that are not often in the media. I think people experiencing themselves migrations, but also NGOs, activists, academic also, because we are a lot of actors working around migration, and I think we all have something to bring to society.
Thank you very much, Valériane. It was super interesting to hear from you and to also hear this very interesting work that you are doing. And we hope that we will find another opportunity to sit down again and hear more about the findings that will come out from your project.
Thank you, Omar.
Thank you very much. Thank you.